So, welcome to our topic number three. Uh, in this topic, we will be discussing about international purchasing and global sourcing. We have had very interesting discussions here in the previous lecture, two lectures. So, by the end of this particular topic number three, I expect that you will now be able to explain various concepts and benefits of international purchasing and global sourcing. You will also be able to identify the key factors and challenges that are influence global sourcing decisions. You will also be able to apply tools and techniques that are crucial in terms of selecting, evaluating, and managing global suppliers. So we want to know, how do you go ahead to choose a global supplier, and what kind of a relationship do you create so that you can maintain them. We will also, by the end of the lecture, I also expect you to be able to analyze the risks and opportunities of global sourcing in different regions and markets. And finally, I will expect you to be able now to come up and design and implement an effective global sourcing strategy and contracts. So we now focus on what we call international purchasing and global sourcing. We want to understand the meaning of these two terms. When we talk about international purchasing, we are referring to the buying of goods and services from overseas. Overseas means anywhere out of the country that you are in. Often, and this is done oftenly through reactive and focused on individual transactions. So we will also delve more into understanding international purchasing. But the key word is for you to understand the definition that we are talking about: buying goods and services from overseas. And then the other word is global sourcing, where we are saying it is the proactive integration of a worldwide network of suppliers. So when we are talking about integration, then we mean that we are bringing very many worldwide suppliers into a one pool. Mm. And then we also ensure that we have the correct resources. We have discussed about strategic procurement in our previous lecture. So we understand and make sure we are strategic when we are doing global sourcing, and make sure we are coordinating all what we are doing in relation to global sourcing across the business units. Now, international purchasing, we are noting that may not necessarily be same as simply as importing. So we will be seeking to now understand what it is, why is it important, uh, uh, because number one, we are able to access lower costs. So we could we could likely be able to access materials at a cheaper price. I was having a discussion with somebody who has discovered some of the items they buy within a local market, they are not the best. So now they are now ordering their items from Alibaba.com and those other e-commerce platforms. And they were telling me now the quality of the items they are receiving, it's quite high. If we are talking about a leather product, uh, for example, it's not just a conversation around leather, which is not a genuine leather. So when we go to international purchasing, then those products may be cheap. You would receive a higher quality of those products and also have a broader variety of those particular products. You have a wide array of products that you can be able to choose from. And then also through international purchasing, you are able to gain what we call competitive advantage. When we talk about competitive advantage, then we simply mean that you have an upper hand compared to other people that are sourcing their products, maybe locally. So it puts you at a upper hand to enjoy better goods and efficient, it's also a very efficient and effective process. Now, we will also look at what we call the types of international purchasing. We have three of them. The first one is what we call multinational sourcing. So this involves coordinating requirements among global business units. And also we can also define it as seeking suppliers and resources from multiple countries. So that simply means that you have diversified your supplies, and therefore many more goods and services that you could receive from multinational sourcing, like we have said, may be of good quality. So the second type of international purchasing is when we do global sourcing. And we are saying this is one of the proactive and integration of global supply network. So we bring together a range of very many suppliers from the global arena to be able to continuously and consistently supply you with goods. And finally, number three, another type of international purchasing is what we call the strategic global sourcing. And we are saying this is a kind of a high level coordination. Remember, we were using from the previous lecture so much on the word strategic, and we said a strategy is a high level plan. So when we talk about strategic global sourcing, that's why we are beginning by calling it also a high level of coordination across purchasing, engineering, and operations. So we ensure a lot of coordination of sourcing activities across all departments within an organization, looking at sourcing our raw materials, looking at sourcing our goods from an external source. Now, a very important question that we are going to be asking ourselves in this lecture: what are the reasons of international purchasing, or why do we need to do international purchasing? Reason number one that companies, organizations, countries are focusing on international purchasing is, number one, materials may not be available locally. So what we may be looking for may not be available locally. I gave an example of the purchasing of vehicles from Japan and other countries. It is simply because the countries that our local countries do not have, we have not gotten to that point where we can be able to manufacture our own vehicles. So it's not about the unavailability of materials alone. It could also be unavailability of so many other goods that we need and we do not produce. Another reason that we do international purchasing, number two, is an unsatisfactory domestic product quality. You could be having issues with the quality of the item. You don't feel satisfied with that kind of a quality. So you decide to focus on an international market to get a better good. I've just talked about my friend who has now discovered a different source where they can get small things that are not charged much in terms of taxation. Lower prices from international suppliers. Yeah, so international suppliers would also be giving us an item at a cheaper price. That's another reason why people are looking to get these things from an international purchasing perspective. Uh, Number four is because of access to advanced technology. So we could be having those goods coming into your country, developed out of as a result of advancement in technology, and you will find that this kind of advancement, as a country or where you are or where I am, we have not reached that point. Technology has not taken us to that point where we can manufacture very sleek cars, very sleek televisions, very sleek mobile phones. That's another market. The mobile phones market is a market which many African countries are still depending on international purchasing to be able to get the appropriate gadgets. And finally, the last reason on why we do international purchasing is to have sourcing efficiencies and a broader supply base. So you have a wider pool of the product that you are looking for. That's what we are calling a broader supply base. So you have many suppliers that you can be able to find out from them what they are selling, and you can do comparisons of which item you are going to pick. Now, how do we benefit when we do international purchasing? That's another very important question that we ask ourselves. How do we benefit when we do international purchasing? Number one, higher quality goods. We have mentioned that. So you are likely to receive better goods and higher quality goods. Number two is access to required materials and skills. So you are able to access better raw materials. You are able to access individuals and human beings that are more knowledgeable about the product. They can be able to tell you the pros and cons. And you, in terms of skills also, there are those people that guide you when you are doing international purchasing activities. So they are able to help you go about it. The other one is improved timeliness as another benefit. When we are talking about improved timeliness, we are simply meaning that you are able to get goods in a quicker manner, in a more efficient manner, and that is in relation to the periods between when you order and when you receive. So and so on and so forth. And that could also mean faster delivery of goods. That is also timeliness. And that could also mean reduced lead times. We also, as another benefit, we can also likely to be able to save cost savings. Like I said about my friend, whatever goods that they are buying within the country, they realize they can get them from a different particular place at less or at a 50% discount compared to what they buy from their local market. So there is the element of cost saving also when you are buying internationally or when you are purchasing internationally. There is what we call competitive advantage. We just mentioned issues of quality as our point number one. So competitive advantage simply means that you have an up the quality of goods that you are receiving from international purchasing. And the other benefit of international purchasing is the benefit of counter trade opportunities. When we talk about counter trade opportunities, is also what we would also refer to as reciprocal trading between two parties. So either of the parties that are trading would benefit from one another. I can be able to tell my supplier, uh, or countries can be able to tell suppliers of different goods. We can be able to buy these items from you, and you also in return you can be able to buy these items from us. I'm sure you have heard when presidents visit your country, there is a common conversations around what we call bilateral talks. So when you are doing bilateral talks, it may not look very good for African countries to always look at how they are going to be benefiting from the developed world and they have nothing to offer. Yeah. So we need to take our African countries to that position where we can do counter trade opportunities, and that we are going to benefit. And for the places where we are buying cars, like in Japan, then we can partner as countries to be able to know, then what can Japan be able to take from us? Now that depends on the strengths of the items that you are producing. In countries like Kenya, for example, they are very good in terms of things like coffee, tea. Those are things that the country can export in large quantities. So counter trade opportunities are simply opportunities where either party or each party is to benefit from one another in a good or a service. And lastly, the final benefit of international purchasing is you are able to have a reduced capital. So reduced capital investment simply means you will find yourself in a situation where as an organization you will need to spend a lesser amount, mm, like we have said, in terms of saving of cost. So you will not spend a lot of money in terms of investing in manufacturing, for example. It could be a bit cheaper than to get the item or to manufacture the item. It could be cheaper than that when you do international purchasing. But these are not things that we are saying that are a must. Every organization and every individual in the business that they do, they have to compare these prices. Compare the prices of manufacturing an item, compare the prices of getting the similar item into from an international market. A very, very interesting discussion here on this particular slide, where we want to understand on the risks of international purchasing. What are some of the things that are going to affect our international purchasing venture? Number one, and a very, very common issue, is what we are calling security risks. And when you are talking about security risks, then we are talking about political instability. For example, we have countries that are in continuous war, for example, like what is happening in Ukraine, in Russia. Assuming we have a market of goods, like many countries have, that they get from those two countries, for example, fertilizer from Russia. Then during this particular season where they have political instability, it could be a situation where we cannot be able to import our goods at that particular moment or at this particular moment. And also, we have internal turmoil. This is turmoil within countries. We could have political issues within countries that are hindering our international purchasing processes. The second risk is what we call the cost risks, and this is in relation to things like hidden cost. Sometimes the price that you are seeing on an item may not be necessarily the actual price. Maybe we have other hidden costs. Maybe there has not been discussion about the transportation cost and so many other costs. So at the end of the day, you realize you could have spent a lesser amount if you did not incur these hidden costs. We also have, in terms of costs, risks, we have challenges around the transactional complexities, and this is going to involve also transactional complexities in terms of the payment. So what payment method are you going to use? You can imagine you are importing a car from Japan, and these dealers are telling you to drop 10,000 US dollars to their account. Uh, of course, it is a risky affair. So that's what we need to do when we are doing international purchasing. For us not to be affected by these risks, then we need to do a lot of research to make sure that we are doing it right. So transactional complexity is a major issue. So what payment platform are you going to use? What bank are you going to use? Those are issues that would cause a delay a friend of mine was asking me about PayPal and how does PayPal work, because it is one of the online payment platforms that can be used across countries. Those are things that you need to know. You could also find transaction costs maybe are expensive. On the cost risks, finally, we have the example of tariffs. Tariffs are the taxes that countries are charging for any item that is getting into their space, or what we could call import taxes. So they are quite expensive. The cost of you would agree with me that now the cost of acquiring a car now is not the same like 10 years ago. Nowadays we have a lot of issues around taxation that has really made the pricing to go up. So are you able to meet the tariff costs? The other one is quality risks, difficulty verifying supplier quality, different standards. Yeah, so you may not be necessarily be able to verify whether you are dealing with the correct supplier. I have seen some people when they are beginning any transactions involving around international purchasing, first they are going to travel to that country so that they can create what we called in the previous lecture supplier relationships. Now that makes you easier. It makes it easier for you now to maneuver in the subsequent transactions. Different standards, so issues to do with standardization. The other one is what we call intellectual property risks. Yeah. This could be an example of exposure of proprietary knowledge. Now, when you talk about intellectual property, we are referring to things like patents, things like trademarks. You could be buying an item from somebody, but they are not, the trademark that they are using is a copy pasted trademark. It's a trademark that has been stolen from a place. If I ask you today what tells you that a car is a Mercedes Benz, you will see the trademark on top of the bonnet there. That's what we are referring to as the trademark. So people are infringing on other people's property in the name of business, and that is something that is very dangerous to do. We have issues to do with copyrights, where people copy other people's music. Yeah. Also, copying of other people's books. You could also be ordering a book from an international space, whereas the supplier has no relationship with the original author of the book. Maybe they have made a copy of the book. All those are intellectual property rights. One of the issues with musicians in some countries in Africa is the issue of copyrighting their music, or the issue of redoing their music. So they end up not earning any money from it because there is a lot of piracy. You sing a very nice song and then somebody just picks it and makes so many copies of it and sells. Uh, so they end up benefiting more than the musician. So around the intellectual property rights, we have those kind of issues around patents, trademarks, copyrights, and so on and so forth. So that happens when we suffer infringements of any of those rights. The other kind of risk of international purchasing is payment and currency issues. I've talked about payment. Now we are having conversations around current currency issues. I think I also mentioned them in the previous lecture in relation to having currency fluctuations, like the relationship between the dollar and the local currencies of different countries in Africa is changing. So it becomes difficult to trade, and therefore when you're going to the international market, you will end up increasing the prices to your customers because you're also spending a lot. when you are changing your currency into the dollar, it becomes an issue that it really affects the international purchasing. And other risks are advance payments. I've mentioned that a while ago, where you are told to pay, make an initial payment of this amount. Yeah, I've lost money through such kind of transaction. So it's a risky activity. That's why I'm saying there is need to do a lot of research around issues of payments on how to go about it. And therefore, the other one is volatile exchange rate. I've just mentioned that. So fluctuating, the exchange rate is always fluctuating and therefore affecting business. The other one is time, quality, and place risks, supply disruptions, transport risks. So we could have supply disruptions, like I gave an example on the previous lecture. For example, during the time for COVID, there was quite a disruption there. Transport risks, also a major issue. Countries now and then would have airspace conflict, like very recently, Tanzania wanted to start doing their cargo flights into Kenya, Nairobi, and there was a tussle there. It's like the Kenyan government was not willing, and then in return, the Tanzanian government also said, "Now, do not bring your passenger flights into our country," and that necessitated serious conversations between the two ministers of those countries to be able to resolve that transportation risk that we might be faced with. Very recently, also Somaliland had banned the selling of miraa from Kenya into their country. So they completely cut down that route, and you realize also the people that are in that business are so much affected by that kind of an issue. Negotiation and relationship risks. So we could find a challenge in terms of negotiating, maybe because of cultural differences, uh, inability for the negotiators to speak the same language. Those are communication barriers. And finally, the last risk is in terms of compliance, legal, and reputational risks. Different countries, of course, have different legal frameworks and compliance that you are expected to meet, and also ethical standards. So, are you able to meet those legal frameworks? If you are unable, then that's a major risk that could affect your international purchasing procedures and activities. Now, mitigating risks. This is simply meant to answer the question of how do we deal with the risks that we have just mentioned uh, here. Number one, we need to do careful supplier selection and qualifications. So if we want to import a particular item, then how many suppliers do you have at your disposal? And we also make sure that they are qualified. They have met the set international law frameworks in terms of importation of goods and services. The other one is strong contracts and risk management plans. Yeah, so we can make sure when we get into these supplier sourcing agreements, then we sign very good contracts to assist us to be able to get it right. And then for us also to be able to deal with what we have just called negotiation and relationship risks, where we have talked about communication barriers, we need to ensure that there is effective communication and collaboration. And also cultural awareness and sensitivity. You need to be aware of different cultures of different countries, on where you are importing your goods, where you are exporting your goods, so that you do not get into a lot of trouble when you are doing purchasing. And finally is monitoring and compliance programs. So you need to do a lot of monitoring to ensure that whatever laws that have been put in place, you are able to comply with them. Then we are going to look at proactive measures in, yeah. So what are some of the things that we need to do? so that we manage the risks in global sourcing and national purchasing. So number one is forecasting and procurement planning. So we need to make sure, the first thing, that when we are doing forecasting, then we are projecting. We are projecting when we may need certain goods and services, and then we plan for them when we import. So that's what we are seeing on the explanation. The black dot is the main point. Then the dot that is like a is an explanation of. So that we are simply emphasizing on the need to accurately predict demand, where we consider longer international lead times. Yeah. And then also we need to develop a procurement timeless and proactively to avoid delays. So we need to know, when you're talking about plant procurement timelines, we need to know, when I order this car from Japan, how long is it going to take me to receive? Otherwise, anxiety is going to finish us here thinking that we were duped, but we did not research in terms of procurement timelines. Get to understand when a particular item, how long is it going to take before it lands in your country. And then another proactive measure in risk management, then we need to do transportation planning. So we need to maximize on different routes and modes of transport that are available for security and efficiency. We have quite a number of transport modes. We have road transport that will depend on the distance where your goods are. They could be across the border, maybe in a neighboring country around East Africa. We have air transport, we have rail transport. All those are examples of modes of transport. Then manage custom clearance processes effectively. Now, risk management frameworks. There are frameworks that we continue to adopt. The first one is risk identification and monitoring. So that is calling upon us to thoroughly assess the potential risks in advance. We have just had a whole slide of more than 5 risks, close to 10. So which of those that we listed in that particular slide are likely to affect your goods getting into your point of destination? So once you do that, you also continuously monitor risk factors and their impact. Monitor what is the likely impact of a particular risk happening to you when you are ordering goods from a far country. And then after that, another framework that we can adopt when we are managing risk in international purchasing is contingency planning. Now, this particular framework, then we need to come up with what we call response plans for various risk scenarios. All these things you need to know in advance. Uh, what happens if I order an item in a particular country, and within 2-3 weeks, then we have what we have just called a political risk in that particular country? Do you have plan B, or what is it likely to happen? So it's saying, come up with a response plan that is going to help you maneuver in whatever scenario in regards to risk that might occur. And then the other one is ensure swift and effective mitigation measures. So you need to be very fast. Mitigation measures are just measures on how to be able to deal with the risk. You need to ensure that you are fast in regards to that. Now, when we are doing international purchasing, like we have said, it's a risky affair, and therefore you need to have financial protection. So how do we go about the issues of financial protection? Number one, we can have insurance coverage. So you need to secure an appropriate insurance against high impact events. Those I'm sure there are negotiations or discussions that insurance companies can be able to take you through, so that in case of anything, then you do not lose the entirety of your goods. You can imagine there are business items that maybe you're coming to sell, and then something happens. You need to find out. In case of any risk, you need to find out on what to do. And part of maybe helping you to cover the risks of loss, then we could have the conversations around insurance coverage. And this is going to assist in minimizing the financial losses because of unforeseen risks. Then the other one is what we refer to as Incoterms. Now, Incoterms is a short form for a name we call international commercial terms. You need to understand them. These are what we call international trading rules, that are published by International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC. So you cannot be in international purchasing and you do not know these Incoterms. So these rules are going, for example, to specify the delivery point, who is responsible for arranging and paying for the transportation. Remember, everybody, the seller and the buyer, all of them are governed, or there are those obligations that they need to meet. So some of them are clarified in the Incoterms. The issues, other issue around the Incoterms are the risk transfer. That is when the risk passes. When does the risk pass from the seller to the buyer? You can imagine a good is in transit and then something happens. Who takes the responsibility? Is it the seller who released the items already, or it is the buyer who is expecting the item? That is an area that you need to be conversant with. And then also under Incoterms, you have to make sure that you avoid contractual ambiguities and disputes. So avoid any form of disputes in relation to contracts. And the other one is cultural collaboration, local expertise and communication. So when we want to consider the aspects of culture, then we need to be conversant with the local area language and communication. So how can you go about that? Number one, you can partner with local agents and consultants for cultural understanding and negotiation support. If you do not understand the language in where you are importing your goods, for example, you could partner with people that can assist you to be able to do that. And then also utilize translation and interpretation services. These ones are also quite conversant, and they are quite around us. We can also use translation services to assist you maneuver around the cultural and communication challenges that might arise. When we are doing international sourcing, we could be faced by a number of challenges. Number one, so those are now the challenges of international sourcing. Number one would be culture and communication. I've just mentioned that from the previous slide. So how do we bridge the differences in terms of culture and communication? If we do not do it, then it's going to be an impediment for us to be able to trade internationally. And also address language barriers and potential misunderstanding. We have said one way to do it is to be able to talk to people that can be able to do interpretation for you in the aspect of language barriers. There are people, if they are doing a lot of trading in other countries, international purchasing, they would also learn that language. Yeah, they would learn the language so that now they will not need to keep hiring interpreters. Another challenge on international sourcing is what I call lead, or what is called lead times and delays. I mentioned the issue of lead time in our previous lecture, and I said lead time is the period between which a company orders goods and when they receive the goods. So how is it a challenge? You could be ordering a good and somebody is telling you maybe to wait for 6 months, whereas you are unable to do it. Yeah. So how do you manage those longer lead times due to shipping? We could have that could be as a result of shipping. Maybe we are using water transport, which may delay for some time. Customs, maybe the levels of taxation that we are being charged across borders, and other coordination complexities. And finally, proactively mitigate potential delays. Other challenges revolve around the issues of quality assurance. Yeah, so you need to establish a clear standards and expectations within international suppliers on how you are able to monitor the aspects of quality. Yeah. The other discussion is around what we call cost optimization or what we call cost maximization. How do we work around that when you are doing international purchasing? Number one, we need to look for ways that we can minimize overhead costs. And how do we minimize overhead costs? We can work around taking advantage of technology and communication tools to reduce travel. For example, what you are doing in this session here, you could have Google Meet meetings with your clients, you could have Zoom meetings with your clients, and therefore it reduces the cost for you to travel back and forth as you try to resolve or obtain a particular good. Yeah. And also, so you're also reducing site visit expenses when you take advantage of technology. When you are using the word leverage, we are talking about taking advantage of technology to be able to reduce the travel issues. The other one is streamline administrative processes for international transactions. So this is also very, very important. Another way of cost optimization is the supplier selection and relationships. So number one, we can invest in looking for very qualified suppliers and those suppliers that are reliable. And also the other one is build a strong relationship with suppliers for trust and collaboration. In regards to payment and financing, there is always an opportunity for you to negotiate favorable terms that you can be able to hack or maneuver. So also make sure your payment you are using a secure platforms, and also explore financing options, maybe to manage capital investment. Maybe if you now have established yourself as a person who imports goods, then you can look for financing options in banks to help you to be able to reduce the effects of maybe using your personal savings and other sources of funds. Now we discuss a term that we call global sourcing, and we are saying it refers to the practice of procuring goods, raw materials from suppliers that are located in different countries around the world. So we are also saying that it's a strategic approach in to be able to identify and engage suppliers outside one of domestic markets in order to optimize quality, availability, and other factors. So we have used the term strategic very commonly in our previous lecture. So global sourcing is just a high-level plan or approach where you engage suppliers from outside. Now, our next discussion is around the impact of trade wars on global strategies. Now, different countries are in trouble because of what we call trade wars. Yeah. And these are conflicts between nations that are characterized by, for example, when countries increase tariffs, that is a problem. Yeah, that could cause trade wars. And also trade barriers. There could be other forms of restrictions and other different restrictive measures that are going maybe to be telling a country is like, we do not need your goods anymore. By doing that, they can impose extremely high taxes and so on and so forth. Offshoring, reshoring, and nearshoring. These are other terminologies that we are going to be interacting with in international purchasing and procurement or purchasing. When we are talking about offshoring, then we mean that we are moving production to lower cost countries, primarily driven by cost reduction. Now, I would move from South Sudan and go set up my company in Kenya. Then, after some time, I realized the cost of running my company in Kenya has become very expensive. Then I return it to South Sudan, my home country. That's what, because maybe the environment there is a bit favorable, it has lower cost in terms of running the country, and so on and so forth, and vice versa. It depends. Offshoring now depends on your home country where you intend to return the services, because where you had retreated maybe another country to go set up, the cost of running the business has become very, very expensive there. Another term is what we call reshoring, so bringing production back home, motivated by quality intellectual property. So you could also be motivated by better quality products, intellectual property protection. Maybe a musician was running to another country because in that particular country they have intellectual property protection for their musician, and there is nothing, or for their music, and there is nothing like piracy. And then the country that they left, at some point, they also come up with very good laws. And the musician would now decide, let me go back to my country now. The laws are favorable. My music is protected. Nobody is going to be copying it. The other one is nearshoring, where we source from geographically close countries, balancing cost advantages with proximity and reduced lead times. So when you are nearshoring, then you're trying to come to go to a country or do manufacturing in a location that is closer. Uh, so I would like you also to do research on these three terms that you can be able to understand them better. Um, Now, reasons for worldwide sourcing. What are some of the reasons that make people do worldwide sourcing? Number one is access to cost-effective resources and lower production cost. Maybe when you source worldwide, you are going to get your items at a lower cost. The other one is a broader variety of suppliers and specialized skills. The variety of suppliers, we have mentioned it in one of the slides. So you could be exposed to bigger and many suppliers. The other one is improved product quality and innovation through access to new technology. Yeah. So the other one is enhanced global market reach and competitive advantage. So you are better able to reach a bigger market, and you are also able to have an upper hand, what we are calling competitive advantage, because of aspects around what we have just called quality, price, and so on and so forth. And finally, the last reason on why we do worldwide sourcing is enhanced access to specialized expertise. Mm. You have access to people that they know exactly what they are doing, and therefore it means the item or the good that you are receiving has been worked on very well and to your benefit. Uh, so we also discuss what we call total cost of worldwide sourcing. So what kind of costs are you going to incur when you are doing worldwide sourcing? Number one, direct costs. This is in regards to material, in regards to labor, in regards to transportation, tariffs, and duties. You need to be cognizant of that. And also other indirect costs that may come in handy when you are doing worldwide sourcing would be things to do with the logistics, communication. You could be spending a quite substantial amount in terms of communication with your suppliers, quality control, You could be expected to pay some finances for quality control or for your goods to be examined if they are of high quality, supplier management, and risk mitigation. And we are saying finally, it is also very, very important to consider the total cost of ownership and not just the initial price. Obstacles to global sourcing. We have had a similar discussion around this, so I'll not spend a lot of time here. What are some of the challenges that are going to affect global sourcing activities? Cultural differences and communication challenges. We have mentioned about that. Long lead time, transportation delays, logistics complexities, that has also been mentioned. Quality control issues and intellectual property risks, political instability, trade regulations, and also managing of diverse supplier relationships to ensure ethical sourcing practices. So these are statements that have been clarified, but it is good that we are having them here again as now specific obstacles. You can link this slide to the slide on types of risks, because those are also obstacles. Now we have something we call foreign trade zones. What are the advantages of foreign trade zones? Number one, duty-free import and export goods within designated areas. We said in economics we have something we call where companies or countries come together to form trading blocks. And when they form trading blocks, then you realize these trading blocks have benefits in terms of trade that they enjoy. For example, in East Africa, we have what we call the COMESA, we have the EAC, East African Community. Countries within that would be able to lessen maybe trade, and that is advantageous to everybody that is trading within those countries. Tax breaks and streamlined custom procedures. For example, you could also face some tax benefits. Maybe you are a huge importer of an item. Sometimes governments are also going to do what they call zero rating of certain products. So if you are in line with that product, then you are going to benefit. The other one is improved logistics infrastructure and efficient supply chain management. And finally, as an advantage, you are able to attract investment and stimulate economic growth. Now, key drivers for successful global sourcing. What are some of the things that are now going to push us or propel us to succeed when we are doing global sourcing? Number one, we need to make sure that we are doing strategic planning and have very clear objectives. We really emphasize that in our previous lecture. So if you want to succeed in global sourcing, number one, sit down and plan on how to go about it and have objectives of what you intend to achieve. The other one is comprehensive risk assessment and mitigation strategies. You can also have that. So assess the risks. We have had a slide where we discussed about matters risk. So access to find out whether any of those things that we listed in our risk slide do not affect you or happen to you. The other one is a stronger supplier relationship and effective communication. So also seek to create a relationship with your suppliers, that you are in constant communication to be able to achieve whatever is intended to be achieved through global sourcing. The other one is a flexible and adaptable sourcing approach. Yeah, so you need to look for an approach. When you are talking about flexible, then it means you can be able to make adjustments in those in the sourcing approach. And also very, very importantly, invest in technology and digital tools that can assist you to do global sourcing. And finally, the aspect of focusing on quality control also, by ensuring that the goods that you receive are of high quality, is going to be crucial for you to succeed in terms of global sourcing. Considerations when we are doing global sourcing strategies. Number one, the quality and reliability of suppliers. So you want to enter into the global sourcing arena. What are some of the things that you need to have in mind so that global sourcing is a benefit to you? So focus on having the right quality. Number two, what are the costs and benefits of sourcing from different locations? And that's why I was saying we don't just wake up and do global sourcing. You have to compare costs, including tariffs, including taxes, including the cost of transport or logistics, the cost of labor. Maybe you need individuals to assist you. And mostly also the thing that we are having a lot of conversations now is this issue of currency fluctuations. So you need to be cognizant of that. The other one is the risks and opportunities of entering new markets or expanding existing ones. You need to be aware of those risks. The legal and regulatory compliance requirements. So, for example, in terms of documentation for you to do global sourcing, do you have all the documentation? Have you paid all the monies for for you to be able to enter into that activity? And finally is the environmental and social impacts of sourcing decisions such as carbon footprint, labor standards, human rights, ethical sourcing. We had discussions around the environmental issues. Nowadays, like I said in our previous lecture, we are having a lot of conversations in terms of going green, in terms of uh, fuel efficient kind of electronic gadgets. Like people are now moving into electric vehicles. I did give that example in our previous lecture. Tools and techniques for selecting and managing global supplies or suppliers. This is also a very interesting discussion. How do we make sure that we are getting the correct supplier? Because, like we have said, there are people that have lost money in these stories of global sourcing. So you need to have certain techniques that are going to guide you. Number one, we do what we call supplier audits. Auditing is all about a systematic evaluation of the supplier capabilities, performance. Probably you could have friends that have already been in this practice that can guide you to make the right decision. So supplier audits, very, very important. The other one is supplier scorecards. So we have ratings that are done for suppliers. Sometimes when you go to the e-commerce platforms, Alibaba and other platforms, you see when you buy an item, there is the rating aspect. We also have supplier scorecards where we can know who is the most celebrated supplier. I've just seen one of the car dealers in Kenya today post an image of them having received a reward as the most trusted company in terms of importing of cars. That's big for them because it's a marketing strategy. You are telling all your Kenyan clientele that you are doing amazing work. You have been recognized internationally as a good dealer when it comes to vehicles. So these scorecards are crucial also when you are going to the global supplies. And also supplier development. We can have a collaborative process with the suppliers where we improve one another by understanding their supplier capabilities, processes. Yeah. And we are saying when we are doing supplier development, then we can be able to enhance supplier performance, quality, innovation. And finally, what I am sure I also mentioned is what is called supplier relationship management. And we are saying this is a key approach where you manage interactions and relationships with key suppliers. So it's not about me going to an international space and getting my item and coming back. It is also about the question of the relationship. Yeah. What relationship have you created your suppliers? In the sense that in the long run, you can also be able to foster collaboration and innovation and be able to mitigate any other kinds of risks. So that is going to bring us to the end of our discussion. That is going to bring us to the end of our discussion today. So have a good night and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much to